All right, Lone Star Gunners, welcome to the podcast. This is Lone Star Gun Talk, the official podcast of Lone Star Gun Rights, and I am your humble host, as always, Derek Wills. Thank you so much for being here today. I am here with a wonderful guest, somebody that I have gotten to know very well over the past 7 months or so. She's been absolutely awesome, and we have endorsed her in her race for House District 25 of the Texas Legislature, which is Dennis Bonin's old stomping ground. We have Rhonda Seth here. Rhonda, thank you so much for being here again. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Derek. My pleasure to be here. You guys are doing a great job.
Oh, no, you're the one who's killing it. Go ahead and chime on in comments, everybody, where you're watching from. And if you got any questions for Rhonda, please, by all means, feel free to ask. I will relay those to her. And, we'll just kind of wing it for that.
Sure.
So, Rhonda, a lot has happened since the last time that you were on. The whole scandal blew up whenever it came to the whole quid pro quo that Bonin was accused of. He had the accusations out at the time, but the recording hadn't come out. He was still, as far as we all knew, was seeking re-election. That's changed in light of the scandal, and now you find yourself in a very crowded field with, 3 other candidates that are running?
No, there's 5 of us total.
5 total.
5 Republicans and 1 Democrat.
Wow. And everybody else came in like immediately following Bonin's announcement that he was not going to be seeking re-election. In fact, one was like within an hour they had announced, and I forget who that was because there's, like 14 people running in this race.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely a different race than I had geared up for. It hasn't made it really, I don't know. I wouldn't say if it's any easier or not. It's, it's just a very different race than when I actually first talked to you, because you guys were actually my first on-air interview to ever do.
Right.
So I'm glad to be back here with you.
Oh, man. Look, so we've been, Rhonda and I have been talking a lot, obviously, between the time that we were, we first started talking whenever she first announced her run, and we've been talking ever since. I've been kind of keeping up on how the campaign is going. And, it started off, and Rhonda, I'm just going to be blatantly honest. This looked like a huge David and Goliath type scenario. You're taking on the 3rd most powerful man in the state of Texas as essentially a nobody who has never held political office before, who's never even ran for political office before. And now you find yourself in having a very real chance of winning this whole thing. Mm-hmm. How does this whole thing make you feel from where you started looking back to now? What is that whole thing like for you?
Well, it's been, I started this race. I opened my checking account with $60, no political ties, and really didn't know all the players. I just knew that he was not representing our district. I knew that he was kind of trading away our gun rights behind closed doors, and nobody was doing anything to stop it. So it was certainly a big drama, with all his stuff with Michael Quinn Sullivan. I tried really hard to, of course, it reaffirmed why I was running. But I didn't get too mired down in it, just kept trucking forward. I mean, we still have a lot of issues that needed to be addressed. And I just have never gotten off track and have stayed very focused on the issues. Our Second Amendment rights, property taxes, securing our border, the things that I know are important to the people in our district. And when he got out, really, it just made me dig in and work that much harder. And we've had a tremendous amount of grassroots support here within our district. And then over the last 2-3 weeks, we actually have had a tremendous amount of statewide support with a lot of state endorsements by very good groups like Lone Star Gun Rights.
Yeah. So far, you are the 2nd person that we've endorsed in this race. The other being Briscoe Kane, right next door to you in Deer Park.
Right.
Briscoe is a fantastic guy, but the thing is, man, like we're taking this whole approach very differently from 2 years ago.
Hmm.
We endorsed, I believe, 22 candidates last primary, and right now we're
Right.
only at two. We might have one or two more coming out, but those still remain to be seen. With all of that, our hyper focus is to make sure that people understand that our endorsement is something that's not just handed away. It's not just something that to be taken for granted, and it's something that should be cherished, and it should be something that's prideful for a candidate to receive. And I know for a fact that you fit that criteria very well, because you reached out to us like immediately after announcing your candidacy, and you said you guys are the ones that I want supporting me the most. Um, you know, for those who don't know, Rhonda entered this race because of a bunch of reasons, but the one that broke the straw that broke the camel's back was the way Dennis Bonnen handled being having flyers dropped on his house by
Yeah, I mean, he just lied. He
right,
manipulated and he lied. Um, of course, at that point, it became very clear, not that it wasn't already, that he never had any intention to pass constitutional carry. I think really that should have been evident with the appointment of Pancho Navarez. And he just, I mean, you got to give him credit. He's quick on the draw with trying to make an excuse to justify his actions. Um, and just the people here are tired of it, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, no,
So,
absolutely, you're 1,000% right. uh he's kind of an evil genius, and he's maniacal in a very
mhm,
insidious way.
right.
And we had no idea just how conniving he would be, until effectively it was kind of too late with that whole thing. But I'm glad that everything kind of has gone the way that it's gone, and we're really proud to throw our name behind you, Rhonda. So about let's talk about policies here. Obviously, we know where you stand on gun rights. You
Mhm.
are an avid supporter of constitutional carry. You believe that we shouldn't have to beg government to protect or to exercise a right that government didn't grant us to begin with. But let's talk other things. You're very passionate about property tax, correct?
Property taxes, healthcare, border security. There's unfortunately a plethora of topics that need a lot of attention. But
All
yeah,
right.
property taxes is a big one.
All right, so let's start there. What is if Rhonda could wave a magic wand and have your ideal tax situation here in Texas, what would that look like?
Sure, we would eliminate property taxes altogether. It's such an arbitrary, convoluted system. And I think, there's pros and cons to any kind of system. I think a consumption tax would be a much more fair and equitable system. We've got 33 million residents in Texas and 11 million illegal residents in Texas. And when you start looking at a consumption tax, man, it sure does broaden your tax base and spreads that out quite a bit. But the flip side of that is always going to be the government, both federal and state, spends too much money. Um, they're out of control with their spending. Um, but for me, yeah, a consumption tax and eliminating property taxes, and that's a behemoth of a project for sure.
Right.
I've been in a lot of contact with. I think there was a bill last session actually that got a little bit of traction with some of the legislators, and then they ran out of time. Um, but I think it's something that's going to take some time, and we just have to keep pushing. I
Mhm.
mean, property ownership is true independence. And
Right.
here we never own our property. It doesn't matter if you pay your mortgage off and you're still going to end up renting your property from the government. And that's not the way it should be.
Right. But Rhonda, don't you care about the schools? I mean, how are you going to the schools, they need that money. I tell you that if they don't have it, then people are just going to they're not going to be able to read, write and do the maths and everybody's just going to be dumb. What are you going to do about that?
Oh, wow. So the education system in Texas, that's a whole other can of worms. Unfortunately, they are tied together. The first thing we'd do is get rid of standardized testing. To link an 8-year-old's performance with funding is ridiculous, and it's not a good metric of what they're learning. Um, I mean, I think a lot of schools right now we're funding from the top to the bottom, and instead they need to drive those dollars to the classroom and fund from the bottom up, invest a little bit more money in things like vocational schools, the welding, the mechanics, the nursing, the woodworks, things like that. And really take a good hard look at what industries, what kind of skilled labor do we need when these kids get out of school. Um, and so I think we can do that without breaking the bank. And honestly, last year's numbers were, I think, a 7% consumption tax actually would replace the majority of the property tax income, but it's spread out over a broader tax base.
Okay, so you'll have to pardon my ignorance on this one because I'm not. I don't know exactly how this would work, so I'm actually genuinely asking this. I mean, we already have a 6.25% sales tax throughout the state, and
Yeah,
then municipalities can add another 2% onto that.
yeah.
So when you say 7%, you're talking about raising the states from 6.25 to 7.
So let me first be clear, I'm no tax expert.
Okay.
We do have a tax collector who is running in this race, who's been collecting our taxes for 20 plus years. But there's a lot of the details of it that I'm still learning and working on. But I'm trying to educate myself by people who have spent a lot more time on it. Um, so I mean that's kind of where we're at this point.
Okay. So I mean, I like that you basically said I don't have all of the answers, but I'm working with
No,
people. It's very humbling to hear that. I'm glad because everybody's they want to like talk circles around it. Well, you see, if we go about it
no.
this
I
way.
mean, like I said, it's a huge project, and it's something that um, there's a lot of factors to it, and there's a lot of pros and cons to it, and you just have to sit and really kind of weigh that stuff out and talk to people who've studied it for a lot of years. You know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just looking at the federal tax code, and if you think about it, the state tax code is even more convoluted than the federal tax code is. But
Yeah.
just looking at the federal tax code, I mean, nobody knows how the whole thing works. You need a team, and I'm talking a huge team of attorneys to
Mhm.
really understand just certain aspects about it. So yeah, taxation is, or I'm sorry, theft, whatever you want to call it. It's
Right.
very convoluted. It's very
Right.
convoluted code that needs to be dealt with, and so having just a simple answer is not something that can be really done. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and I think they complicate it on purpose. I mean, listen, I make actual life and death decisions for patients every day. Um, so, I mean, I feel like I'm sharp enough. We should be able to figure this out.
Hmm.
Um, but I do think that they overcomplicate it on purpose.
That would probably make a lot of sense. I'm not a huge conspiracy nut, but
Hmm.
people can't complain if they don't understand it.
Right.
Uh, so let's move on. You brought up spending, and that is something that you're a woman after my own heart. You said the state of Texas spends too much. Where would you like to see cuts in spending?
Well, first, I just have to make this announcement on your show, but I did actually just receive also the very rare endorsement of Dr. Ron Paul, um,
Yes, you
who does
did.
who
Yeah.
does who does live here in my district. So um, I'm very much so about smaller government and less spending. There's about well, let me put it this way: there was a $253 billion budget that we passed this year, largest ever in Texas history. And our governor has the ability to line item veto, and not one single thing was vetoed. I don't know who runs their budget like that. I mean, we certainly don't here in our house.
Right.
And there's a million different projects and you know social programs and college state tuition for people who aren't residents here in our state. I mean, there's a ton of things that can really need to be looked at, made more transparent, and probably cut.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I just, as you were talking, my curiosity got to me, and so I pulled up usdebtclock.org, and I
Hmm.
just pulled up Texas. Texas. Now we talk about the U.S. debt, the federal debt, which is over 23 trillion right now. But
Right.
nobody really gives a lot of attention to the amount of debt that the state of Texas is in. According to the usdebtclock.org, pulling up Texas, our GDP here in Texas is $1.9 trillion, and we're 319 billion in debt. We brought in 251 billion, but we spent 297.5 billion. So you're absolutely right. Our spending is atrocious. We
Hmm.
produce so
Hmm.
much and we take in so much, but we spend even more. And it's atrocious. I don't know why we would need to spend that much. I mean, we're supposed to be a champion of small government, right?
Right. And
So
all we did this last session was grow government and increase spending. And it's just unacceptable. I'm going to have to work forever. My kids are going to have to work forever. And it would just be a lot better to cut some of the spending.
absolutely. I mean, you can raise. I mean, if you take a household budget for somebody that is spending more than they take in every year, that has copious amounts of debt, you're not going to tell them, well, I think you should get another credit card, and raise the credit limit on your current card. No, you would tell them, okay, you need to cut up your credit cards. You need
Right.
to stop any and all unnecessary spending right now and
Hmm.
hammer away at your debt, and then you
Right.
can start actually buying some things that you want. Uh, you know, with my political views, government shouldn't really fund much of anything. But
Right.
I mean, we're talking $300 billion is what we
Hmm.
spent. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be this conservative beacon, and we have not
Right.
proven that. Um,
Texas to actual Texas politics and policy does not match Texas image. It just doesn't.
it's interesting that you say that. When I first got into being a gun rights advocate, I noticed that Texas's reputation for gun rights wasn't representative of our reputation. And the more that I've dug in, and the more that I've learned about other issues throughout the state, the more I'm finding out that
Hmm.
it is pretty much true for everything. We have this reputation that we
Hmm.
haven't lived up to for pretty much any facet,
Right.
or any issue whatsoever. We're supposed to be this huge business friendly state, but yet we still can't buy Teslas at the moment.
Right.
Things like
Right.
that. It's like, why? Now I will say,
Well, it's always about control and it's always about money. That's probably been my biggest lesson I've learned in this process is if you wonder why something that should rationally be done, always follow the money, find out where the money's going, and there's your answer of why it's not being done.
I'm revisiting some of the comments here. Carl brought up a pretty good point that I didn't know about. He said, going back to education, just really quickly, he said vocational tech programs can pay for themselves at the high school level. It did in Colorado in the 80s. Do you know anything about that, or have you heard about that before?
Not that particular one. I know my husband went through a Votech school, and I mean, he got out of college with no debt, and he's made a pretty good living, as a master technician.
Absolutely.
Um, so I'm a huge advocate for vocational type programs, particularly down here in our area where we have so much industry. I think there absolutely needs to be more conversation between even as far down as junior high of what kind of skilled labor do they need? What do they see in the future? And then have those vocational programs.
Right.
So I think that's a huge, not every kid needs to go to college. I mean, if a kid wants to go to A&M or UT at this point, I mean, what's a 4-year degree if you have to live there and meal plans? And it's over $100,000.
Right. Um,
So,
So, okay, let's go to a place that I know that you're very knowledgeable about, and that's healthcare. That's because you're a registered nurse. You're an emergency ER nurse, right?
Correct. Yes.
Um, so this is something that's very near and dear to your heart. What does the state of Texas need to do regarding
Mm.
healthcare?
Well, there's a couple of things. I actually just did a little video on my Facebook page out of that where I was talking about healthcare. The first and foremost thing, we have got to push back and get the federal government out of healthcare. They have absolutely zero business involved in healthcare. The second thing that we need to do that could probably be done more easily is we need to get more competition when it comes to insurance. Insurance needs to be able to be purchased across state lines. Right now, we have one or two major carriers in Texas, and the premiums are high, the deductibles are high, and the coverage is terrible. That's because they have no competition. And one of the things that I always say is that a government that controls healthcare controls your population. And I think we're seeing that more and more. And President Trump has done a couple of things, repealing the mandated uh, healthcare payment. And
Mm-hmm.
then the new thing that he just put into that I think believe goes into law in 21 is the transparent pricing, which will go a long way to um, bringing costs down, I think.
Okay. What are some of the major issues that you see as a emergency room nurse that, aside from the actual insurance part of things, what are some things that you see that also should probably
Yeah.
be adjusted?
So one of the things is that I say our physicians kind of boxed into a corner at this point of, you're the one laying hands and eyes on a patient, you're listening to them, you're looking at their vital signs and all that. And you should be able to make a determination as a physician at that point what that patient needs. And when your physician says you need this medication or that medication, and then your insurance company comes back who's never seen you, never listened to you, never heard you, says, "Oh, you don't need that medicine or you don't need that surgery." I mean, you have people who aren't qualified making often life and death, decisions for people. And again, it always comes back to the money. Insurance companies are a trillion-dollar industry, and they're just far too powerful. Um, I work at a freestanding emergency room. Insurance companies hate freestanding emergency rooms because we are too accessible. They want you to go sit in the emergency room for 6 hours out in the waiting room and decide, no, I don't really want to do this. And usually in the freestanding scenarios, you get in and out pretty quickly. And they don't like that. So they make it very difficult for that business model.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Um, so, all right. So I think I'm tracking with what you would like to do, and that's basically get government out of a lot of things and free up
Absolutely.
their abilities to do that. There seems to be a recurring theme that I'm picking up here. In case anybody's curious, it seems like she doesn't like the government being involved in anything. Is
That's fair.
that right?
That's fair.
So let's talk border security. That's one thing that you. That's another thing that you brought up.
Mhm.
What would you do? Again,
Yep.
you can wave a magic wand. We're talking immigration policy and the border itself. What would you do?
Yeah, so I actually got an opportunity to speak with a gentleman who has been a border security officer for over a decade. And the first thing he said was, "Don't believe anything the media tells you." He said they are pouring across the border and we can't control it. And we have to let half of them go anyways because they have kids. So we asked, I said, "What are the top three things if you could have right now?" And he said, "We need more boots on the ground. We need more and better technology." And he said, "We do need a wall." And he kind of went on to explain the geography. And he said, "You need the wall on those long open stretches so that they can concentrate the boots that they do have on the more densely brushy areas that are a little bit harder to watch." So I think that's a big thing. Um, we've got to get rid of the anchor baby law, and I know that's a federal thing, but I literally have helped deliver babies in the emergency room of people who were 9 months pregnant. They're on vacation, you know.
Hmm.
Um, it's a system that's very abused. The ones that are here, the dreamers they call them, or DACA. Um, I have a little different viewpoint on them. If you were brought over here as an infant and you've grown up here and you're an adult here, this is your country. I think that we need to come up with some quick and decisive avenues for these people to get their actual citizenship, be it military service or, just a process of, a constitutional class and some government classes, things like that. And it can't be ridiculously expensive through, the attorneys, and give them a time limit. You've got a year to get your citizenship. If you don't do it, if you've got an easy path to do it and you don't do it, then you have to go home. Um, but definitely, I think we've got to give our border security agents more tools. Um, Only 800 million, I believe, of our last budget got allocated to border security. And again, that is a federal issue and they're not doing their job. So I think the states need to be more forceful in their demand of the federal government to do their job. It's one of the few constitutional responsibilities they have, and it's not being done.
Right on. So I have a kind of a different question from what we've been on. Uh, we've talked about your policies and what you would like to see the state of Texas do. What sets you apart from your other four opponents?
Sure. We get asked that question all the time because we're at the same places all the time. And I always say, some of that's really simple. Um, Everybody on that stage is going to sit there and tell you, I care about our Second Amendment rights. I care about property tax rights. But not one of them, besides myself, cared enough to take on the person who in our area had some control over those things. They were intimidated by the money, the power, I don't know. And so my question is always going to be, of any of those people, what kind of legislator are you going to be? How hard are you going to fight on my behalf for these things when you're faced with that same, if not more, money and power? Um, I was the only candidate in this race who has stepped up and basically moved forward on the behalf of our district against that. And that's the kind of legislator I'll be. I'm sure they don't want me there.
So basically, you're saying that you're going to go to Austin and not make friends.
I'm pretty sure they're going to stick me, if we get there, they're going to stick me down in the basement somewhere. Luckily, I'm pretty self-entertained, and it's like when I first announced, I would go to the local meetings and the county meetings and things like that, and people wouldn't make eye contact with me. They wouldn't talk to me. If somebody had a cell phone out, like they were going to take a picture, I always had like a 10-foot radius around me where nobody wanted to accidentally get in a picture with me. But that kind of stuff kind of rolls off of me. It's more amusing than anything. Um, I don't know, just that sort of thing doesn't bother me, I think, because I know what I'm trying to do is the right thing,
Right.
and, I will do that right thing regardless. I'm more of a sheepdog than a sheep.
Right. So you've got these other opponents that kind of saw it as an opportunity after the fact. You entered this race, when you were going up against the Goliath of a powerhouse that
Yeah.
was Dennis Bonnen.
Mhm.
He was somebody that is I'll just put it as evil, kind of. Oh, by the way, just quick tangent, guys. I wanted to let y'all know we just got a ruling in our federal lawsuit against him. The judge has denied his motion to dismiss our case, so now we're moving forward with discovery and all that fun
Excellent.
stuff. Yeah, we just got that news. I think last week or so. So
Good.
that's good stuff. I was really happy to hear that. It takes so long because speed of government is incredibly slow.
Always
Uh,
efficient, always efficient. Yep.
so Rhonda, you've had an overwhelming amount of support flow in from mainly from gun rights individuals as well, but it kind of swelled in with this whole boot Bonin thing from Tom Glass and
Mhm.
Tommy Catholic Glass, and you've been like using this to the best of your ability, and you've grown into this amazing campaign.
Mhm.
How would you say the campaign is going, and what lessons have you learned?
Yeah, here's the biggest lesson is that I think where politicians get off sometimes is they try so hard to please and appease whoever they're talking to. I don't do that. And I think that if you know what your values are and you know what your principles are when you go into a situation, when you're asked a question, when you're asked to vote on something, the question and the situation really becomes irrelevant because you apply your values, you apply your principles, and that's how you stay on track. Um, I'm not somebody who's afraid to pick a side. I generally pick a side and I stick with it. Um, and so, that's probably been a big thing. And then the other thing is that people just want you to talk to them. They want to be heard, which is why my cell phone number is on everything. I take phone calls from anybody who wants to talk about what's going on in our district here. And I always tell them if there's a lobbyist sitting in my office or a constituent sitting in my office, I will always go in favor of the constituent because that's why I'm doing this. Um, is to, to protect that relationship and to just get some effective legislation taken care of. Everybody's a little sick of politics as usual, I think.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This might be a premature question to ask, but if you should you win this thing,
Mhm.
um, do you see yourself doing a couple of terms and then maybe moving on to a higher office, or what?
No,
No.
no,
So there's not going to be any Rhonda Seth for governor campaign.
absolutely not. Of course, I say no, but I never ever thought there would be a Rhonda Seth for state rep, thing
That's
either.
true.
So, you know, um, no, I my goal is, and one of the things that I liked about, say, Jonathan Stickland is he said his goal was to go out on his own terms.
Hmm.
And for me, it would be the same. I want to do a good job for my district. I want to make some headway and kind of turning the barge around in the way our politics is going, and protect some of the things. That's why our slogan is true to Texas values. The things that people think of when they think of Texas, independence, freedom, self motivation. Those are the things that I would like to protect and make more of a reality than what we are looking at today.
Right. Um, Rhonda, look, you are amazing as
Yeah.
always. I mean, I could seriously have you on forever. But I know that there are people. It's it's after 8 o'clock, and I know that they
Mhm.
probably want to move on with their evening and get ready for work on
Yeah.
Monday. But so before we let you go, is there anything that you would like to say? To anybody listening and tell them how they can help and all of that.
Well, first, I want to talk a little bit about Lone Star gun rights.
Oh.
Um, the the endorsement process for Lone Star gun rights, and I just want to make this very clear to everybody. Even though we had a very good rapport from day one, was not a give me. I had to answer all the questions and go through the paces to do that. And one of the things that you guys did, and I think people should know this, is when you called me to say that you guys would endorse me, you said this is not a forever endorsement. You have to earn it, you have to maintain it. And if you don't, we'll call you out publicly. That is exactly what every voter should be doing. That's exactly what every endorsement should be doing. Um, it's not a one-time thing because, people can start off doing really well and then they're left unchecked and unquestioned, and that's how people get off track. So I want to kudos to you guys for being very clear about that up front. Again, I think every single voter should be doing exactly that thing. Um, As far as if you're an HD25 listener, get out and vote. Early voting starts February 18th, which is in 1 week and 1 day. Lasts till the 28th, and then of course the primary election is March 3rd. And take some friends. Well, if they're going to vote for me, take some friends. If they're not, leave them at home. So, and let's just get this done. One of my favorite Trey Gowdy quotes is, if we want a better government, then you have to send better people. We've got a ton of lawyers. We've got a ton of elected officials and long-term politicians up in Austin. And frankly, that's what I'm running against right now. I've got a lawyer, a career politician, and 2 short-term politicians. And we've just had enough of that. Let's do something different. We have an opportunity here. And if I don't do the job that I'm saying that I'll do, then vote me out, you know. But I do encourage everyone to get out and vote and stay vigilant and ask the hard questions. Man, so many of our rights, so much of our money gets traded away behind closed doors, and you never even know it. So it's up to every voter to shine the flashlight in those dark corners.
Thomas asks a question for you. How will you counter the people that claim you're in bed with the gun lobbyist?
Uh, well, I'll say, which side am I on, left or right here? Because they're on both sides. No, when people talk about lobbyists, first of all, that's what your representative should be within your district. You should be able to go to your representative, tell them your issue, and that's who should be lobbying for you. When it comes to things like Second Amendment rights, pro-life issues, I think the groups, I mean, I haven't accepted all the endorsements. I think you have to be in line both ways, y'all with me and me with y'all. And it's going to take a group effort. It takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of time, and a lot of vigilance to protect these rights. I mean, my gosh, have y'all listened to Michael Bloomberg? I mean, they're not even being covert about what the agenda is anymore, you know?
Yeah,
And we have the time has passed already where we have to stand up and say that's a no-go from Texas.
absolutely. We got Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick pushing universal background checks. A lot of
No,
people are like, well, he was a good Republican. Maybe he's just confused. And I was like, no, man.
no,
If Dan Patrick wanted constitutional carry, it would have become law sessions ago.
right,
It's sad that we have Republicans that want to act like Democrats constantly
right.
in various different ways.
Well, and that's where again we have to ask the questions. Why are you voting this way? What's your motivation? Where's your money coming from? Where's your money going? Um, and I think a lot of times that'll lead us to the answers that we need to know. But we have the power. Go to the voting box and vote them out. Don't be so tied up in the rhetoric of the media that is clearly biased that you don't do your own due diligence and ask the questions. You know,
Yeah,
so that is our responsibility and our right as a voter to ask those questions and to get answers. And if they don't want to answer, vote them out.
absolutely. Well, Rhonda, I'm going to wrap things up, but what's your website and what's your social media so people can find you and help you out?
Sure. You can find me on Facebook at the Rhonda Seth campaign. We're pretty active on there. I do answer inbox questions and, I do most of that stuff myself. And then our website is rhondaseth.com. Of course, donations are always welcome, and I appreciate the $5, the $50, and the $5,000 donations. Every little bit helps, and I appreciate the support. So, Derek, thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's been my pleasure as always. I am really excited to see how this whole thing plays out. And,
Me too.
best of luck to you, Rhonda.
Thank
You
you.
again for everything. I really appreciate it. Guys, again, don't forget, we're still doing our postcard campaign for Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. You can find those on the store. $5 will send you a postcard send a postcard to Dan Patrick on your behalf. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. Until next Sunday, arm yourself with knowledge and share the ammo.